Hey guys, how you doing? I'm celebrating my 20th year doing music. Yesterday, I was at the doctor's office because I've been having some health problems recently, and sitting next to this guy, started chatting, and he asked me what I did, and I told him I was a singer for about 20 years. I gave him a little bit of the backstory. He said, that's a pretty interesting story. I was like, maybe I should tell people about it. In case anything ever happens to me, I at least have it on record. So here is my story of 20 years of music. I was born into a family of musicians. As a baby, my dad would bring me behind the drum set and sit me on his lap, and I'd bang away at the drums. They'd strap a guitar to me, and the guitar was about the same size as me, and I'd attempt to play it. My dad was a drummer in the late 60s for a band called Kenny and the Young Lions. They were actually featured on American Bandstand for a hit song, Crying All Night. And my brother was a guitarist, drummer, and vocalist who played in a lot of local bands. As a kid, I always had my headphones on. Back in the early 80s, I was a big fan of Def Leppard and stuff like that, and Michael Jackson. And I always would fantasize being on stage singing was something I was attracted to from an early age. And as I got older, my music taste changed. It turned more to metal. I like everything else too. I'm a pretty open music listener. Influences are electronic music, alternative, rap, death metal, and all the heavy stuff. As a teenager, I experienced that first love breakup, and I was pretty devastated, like we've all experienced. But I didn't really have an outlet to get rid of the pain. Instead, I became introverted and depressed. I stayed away from my friends and stayed in my room for damn near a year, I would imagine. I started messing with the idea, let's try to figure out how to do vocals. There's no death metal vocal lesson. There's really no local music I was aware of at that time that I could really learn from. So it was kind of just winging it. Went to Schumacher Music and got myself an old 4-track recorder, cassette tape. And then I got a really shitty microphone for like $20 from, I think, Walmart. And back then, internet really wasn't a thing yet, so trying to find music to practice over was one of the hardest things. There was really no instrumental metal tracks, that you could buy rap singles and they'd always have an instrumental beat, but not metal. So the first thing I had to figure out was, how do I get music to practice to? People that grew up back then in the 80s, they know about making mixtapes, recording from tape to tape. You'd push play on this tape, and hit record on that tape, and you'd make mixes. Well, that's basically what I did. I'd find a small part of a metal song while they're doing their instrumental, and then I quickly, record it and pause. And then I'd rewind the tape, play that part again, and record it and pause. And I just keep doing that, creating a loop. And I'd throw it in the 4-track and scream over it. And man, the neighbors, my parents, they thought there was something wrong. The sounds coming out of the room were probably of an insane person, No one understood what I was doing. So that method of recording tape to tape, making a loop with a little section of a song that was an instrumental, It worked at first. As I progressed, I needed more, you know. There was really no, like I said, no way to find instrumentals. But luckily, on the Sega CD, there was a little trick. If you took the CDs, the video games, and you put them into a CD player, they would play the soundtrack of that video game through the CD player. So there was a racing game, I think it was Demolition Derby, had metal band instrumentals throughout the whole game. I popped the CD in and then recorded it, and I had finally found a way to get some music to practice to. And man, that took forever. That was like a science experiment trying to figure that out. I would make these little mixtapes and let my friends hear them. I would get a lot of positive feedback. They would say, you know, you actually sound like the singers I hear in the bands for metal music. And I was like, awesome, you know, because I don't know what I'm doing. So that gave me the confidence to keep pursuing. After going to the mall, you know, I heard about this local band playing, and it was called Jesus of Borg, and it was just in a house. So we went to the house. It was like a little party, and they were pretty awesome. But I hated the vocals. The vocalist sucked. He was like trying to do a Limp Bizkit rap over it. It sounded terrible, and I was like, I could do way better than that guy. And he has a great full band, so. Anyway, later on down the road, probably a year from then, I went to Big Apple on Prima Vista and met the drummer for that band. And we talked, and he said he was looking to start a new band. And I said I did vocals. Little did he know I'd never been in a band before. And that ended up being the drummer for Twitch. Off Savannah Road in Jensen Beach, and I had that drummer move in, and he brought the guitarist from that band, Jesus Borg, in, and we started jamming out. And it pretty much immediately clicked, and I was doing very well putting vocals to live music. I never have done that before. We pulled in a bass player and another guitarist, and Twitch was formed. Year 2000, at that time, when we were ready to start playing shows, there really wasn't any local bars or venues that hosted metal bands. Back then there was the old schoolhouse in Vero Beach, and that's really all I know of at that time. So our first problem as a band was trying to find places to let us play. So there was a local biker bar called Ryle Roadhouse. They let us play there, and they all didn't know what to make of us when we played. But I guess they enjoyed it, because after that, we basically started a metal night at the Ryle Roadhouse. And we would play there every couple of weeks. And then some other local bands started coming in the scene, like Three Face was one band we played with a lot. Becoming Final, Dark Faith, Dope Sick, Life Today. Those are a few. And we started getting gigs all around town. There's quite a few places that started playing metal bands. And we started building a pretty decent following. About a year and a half into it, we started the MySpace thing. And we started doing very well on MySpace. and we started needing a manager, someone to help us get shows somewhere else. So we pulled in a manager and we started getting good gigs at places like Kelsey Club and Spanky's. In 2003, Twitch recorded the album at Avalon Studio. It came out really good. That CD became very popular in South Florida. 4 or 5 years into it, we got a call from a record label scout, and she wanted us to come up to New York to get put into metal magazines, Metal Maniacs, Metal Edge, and then she was going to start marketing us to labels. So we went up to New York and we got into the magazines, you know, the photo shoots and everything, and that went well. But then the lady wanted me to basically split the band up and then replace members with, you know, hired guns she knew. I wasn't going for that, and that pissed her off pretty good because she was really wanting to assume control of the band. So basically we went back to Little Jensen Beach and everyone saw us in the magazines, and we were like little rock stars for a little while. I could pretty much go anywhere and people knew who I was, and any restaurant I would get food at, I usually didn't have to pay for things, and I was getting presents from fans. It was pretty freaking cool. Then the negative side of it all started happening. People started getting jealous. Local bands didn't seem to want to play with us anymore. So yeah, the scene here is kind of ass backwards, where in a big scene, like in a city, if a band is successful, other bands want to kind of attach themselves to them and, you know, take part in success, gain some fans that, you know, the more popular bands are bringing in. But in this scene, it was the reverse. It was all of a sudden bands didn't want to play with us, or even called rock stars. We ended up really never having any other metal bands to play with. We always played with like punk bands or rapcore bands. And then around 2007-ish, I would think, Twitch came to an end. The thing about Twitch is I feel like I'm typecasted in a role, like a child actor, like Home Alone. You know, always is remembered for that role. Well, that's how it is for music. I'm always remembered for Twitch, not my other projects. Even when I was in other bands, playing shows, and someone would always yell out Twitch in the background, and I would always be like, God damn it, I'm doing something else. So, and the funny thing about Twitch is everybody recalls, you know, how we were popular, but most of the shows we played weren't very good. I can only think of probably 20 shows that were pretty decent, but we played a lot of shows for nobody. There was a lot of shows where there were 5 people out there, or even just the other bands. So Twitch didn't have a bunch of great shows, and we were marketed to every metal record label you could market to. And we always had the same issue with them. There was always the same reply, and it was, we were kind of multi-genre metal, where we had really heavy death metal type tracks, and then we'd have kind of like rapcore light tracks. So they were scared to take us on because they didn't know who basically to market it to. We needed to have our own genre. They wanted us to like either be death metal or like be new metal, you know. There was no in between. But that's what Twitch was known for, was we were able to cross genres. We could do the heavy stuff, and then we could do the lighter, more mainstream stuff, and we could drag a listener who only listened to heavy music into liking a mainstream music, and then reverse. You know, we could get a mainstream listener to like heavy music. That was kind of one of our special little talents. And that's what attracted people to us. As a vocalist, you know, my first shot, when we first started playing out, I would get sick before every show. I was so nervous. I would throw up before every show, and then I would throw up after. And I did that for, God, probably the first 30 shows. I was so nervous. And then one day I just snapped, and I wasn't affected by the crowd anymore, and I didn't get nervous, and it just changed. And to this day, I'm now able to speak in front of any large crowd, and I don't get nervous around, you know, talking to new people. So that ended up being a good thing. I wasn't a very good front man because I didn't know how to talk to the crowd, and I could blast out the song, but you know, my biggest fear was the damn in between the song period where I had to talk to the audience, and I was terrible at it. I did not know what to say other than, you know, marketing the band, you know, go to our MySpace or buy a CD or thanking the other bands or tip the bartender. I was just very bad at it. But as I got older and more experience with the music, I ended up becoming really good at talking to the audience, and by studying other vocalists and kind of mimicking what they did, I can get the crowd to participate more, and it made it a more fun overall show. During Twitch, I also had some side projects I did.
Shall we play the game?
And Sewerfly was basically me learning how to use FL Studios, but at that time I was just making random songs. It was pretty chaotic, unstructured, very amateur. I didn't know much about composition, song structure, keys, scales, notes. I was just a noob. So I made this really insane digital music. Included every style of music. So it would go from death metal to electronic to jazz to country to opera. It was a mix of everything. It did fairly well. On MySpace it had a large following, but mostly from people overseas. Americans didn't seem to love it. People from overseas really could see, you know, the creativity in it, and it was really different. I did I think it was like a 13-track CD for that. It wasn't very good recording. You know, I was new to all the recording and mixing stuff. I did try to do live shows with Sewerfly, but it was really awkward not having a band behind me and just singing a CD playing. I'm not a big fan of that. It really makes your voice stick out. It was awkward, and that lasted probably 2 years. You know, I had a good following, had quite a few downloads, a couple hundred downloads on the album, and I gave out probably 100, 200 CDs. But that's all been lost to time. I can't find a CD or a track on my computer. I always had a hard time switching between the screaming vocal style and then singing, because it's a totally different way to breathe. So when you're screaming, you're pushing as hard as you can, and then you're like, and you're all out of breath, and then you got to stop and be like, and start singing. And I can do that recording, but doing that live and jumping around, it's really hard for me to calm down and just sing. You know, I always end up putting too much into it. And let's see, another project I did was called Forgotten Life. It was a 5-piece. I started with my guitars from Twitch. We had a new drummer, bassist, and guitarist. And it wasn't the same sound as Twitch. It was more of a thrash band sound. But I still did actually did heavier vocals for Forgotten Life than I did in Twitch. So it was like thrash music / death metal with super heavy death metal vocals. Not everyone got along in that band. So we did a recording of 5 tracks in our storage unit, and then we played probably 5 or 10 shows around town, and that was pretty much it. It was a short-lived thing. It wasn't bad, it wasn't great, and that was that. A Nihilist. Was another group I started with my guitars from Twitch, which was a 5-piece. It was super technical death metal. We had 5 songs in the works. I recorded the music live while we practiced, so there are some recordings. I still have them, but they're not complete songs. That was probably the most technical music I ever played. Probably some of the best music I was ever involved with. Probably practiced for a few months, and then nothing came out of it. We just stopped practicing, and that was the end of it. And then I did Medicine Man, which was my attempt to do a rap album, sort of.
The people of service, they turn like rifle music. Walking over shoulders, control you to my goal. Then trace your body, not your soul. The Illuminati, secret society, Freemason.
With the rap. It did very well on Facebook and had a really good following. I had over 1,000 downloads on the album. I had 13 tracks on it. It did well. It lasted probably 2 years. A group called Sensory Defect. Different animal from Twitch. The music wasn't quite as technical. People that like Twitch really didn't like Sensory Defect, but they were put together pretty well. They had all the equipment, they had the storage unit, they had pretty much everything you could think of, just didn't have a singer. So I gave it a shot, and it was good enough to where I could make it work. I could make the music a little more complex by putting, complex vocals to it. So I got into Sensory Defect, and we had some really good shows. It was more of a younger crowd that was into it. Other musicians didn't really love it. It was more for people that just are music listeners. We went for about 5 years. We played some pretty big shows. The biggest show I ever played was around 20,000 people at Loco Fest, which we opened up for Mudvayne and Nonpoint and Head Peep. So those are some pretty big name bands. And then we tried to relocate to New York. So I moved up to New York. And we did okay, but the scene just didn't really take to us up there. The New York scene's a pretty cliquey scene for local music. Everyone knew each other, so we were just kind of like the new kid in town. And things really just started to fall apart. So after we did that, the band only lasted a year, and then Sensory Defect was no more. I went out to California and just kind of traveled around the country for a little while. During my time in California, I did an internet band called Pledge Your Allegiance. Pledge Your Allegiance, which fell into the deathcore genre. Very heavy vocals over chuggy breakdown metal. Very enjoyable project. I would program drums and send them to a guitarist. He would mix them and then add guitar and bass to them, and then I'd add vocals to it, and we just make songs. It was an internet-based thing where we just uploaded music to YouTube and had a Facebook page for it. It did fairly well, really good, well-produced music. We did a full album, probably 10 songs, and that was pretty much it. We just made some music. In the end, I think it was a really good learning experience. Music taught me a lot about myself. It helped me get over all my little doubts and self-conscious things. It showed me, I can do anything I put my mind to. Overall, it was a great experience. I've done things people will never do. Do I have any regrets? Yeah, I made mistakes. There's a lot of things I would change if I could do it again. There was no book on how to do this. So it was all winging it, and I learned as I went. I don't want to play out anymore. I still make music, but it's just for myself. I have all my music for download on a public domain site, which I'll give you the link in the description. And if you want to download any of the music I've made over 20 years, it's all free. And you're more than welcome to use it for whatever you want. You want to put it in a movie you're making or a video you're making, go ahead. I'm just happy to be able to contribute, and it's nice to know that the art I've made is being used. That's about it, guys. Thank you for listening. My name is Neil Brandt, and I was a singer for 20 years.